Hi, my name is Carolina Galen, and today I'm going to show you how to make this delicious eclair cake. This cake has three main elements. We have the pâte à choux, chocolate ganache, and pastry cream. Fairly easy to make. It involves a little bit of technique, so if you're unfamiliar with these elements, it might be a little bit tricky, but I'm here to make things a little bit more approachable. So we're gonna start with the first element of this cake, which is the pâte à choux. I'm gonna turn on the heat to medium low, and we're just gonna dump a bunch of stuff in this pot. This is Erin McDowell's recipe. She is the pastry queen. We have water, we have milk, I'm going in with some salt, and now we have some butter. It's better if you cube the butter. It's gonna make for a much easier melting process. This has come to a boil. I'm going in with the flour, dump it all in at once, and just start mixing. Our panade, you want it to look smooth. You don't want any dry flour spots, and you want to be kind of rough with it. You'll know your panade is done whenever it looks like a really thick paste. If it's too thick to stir, don't worry about it, don't throw it away. The first time I made choux pastry, I remember throwing it away because I thought I did something wrong because it was too thick, and I was like, there's no way this is what it's supposed to look like. But this is what it's supposed to look like. A thick paste, lump-free, no dry flour spots, and it's very fragrant. It smells like butter. You wanna let this cool for a little teeny tiny bit. You don't want it to be crazy hot because that's gonna cook our eggs when we add them. And you don't want scrambled eggs in your choux pastry. I'm gonna start mixing this a little teeny tiny bit, just to get it to cool off a little bit faster, just like release some steam. So I'm going in with my first little egg. So you just do this again and again until all the eggs have been incorporated in here. Beautiful. Just scrape it down. It's already looking smooth, but I'm gonna give it like a little bit more. It's beautiful. So whenever your choux pastry is done, whenever you're mixing it with whatever you're mixing, I have the paddle now. You could use a spatula to test this with. It should do like a V shape. Some call it tongue, some call it a V, some call it whatever. This triangle-like thing at the bottom of it. So that's how you know your choux pastry is done. Beautiful. So I have a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. I placed a serving dish over it, and I simply line it with a pen. Just like that. And this is gonna be like a great guide to follow whenever I'm piping. And then what you wanna do is simply flip the parchment paper because you don't wanna bake the choux pastry on ink. And what I like to do to secure the parchment paper to make sure it's not flying around too much is just simply pipe a little teeny tiny bit of pastry over there. And that kind of makes it stick. So what I like to do is go around the shape I've created. Just line it like that. I go a little bit underneath the line, and then simply divide this pastry into two. So I like to go like this. Again, it kind of makes for an even distribution. And I repeat the same step until I'm done with this. There are easier ways to do this. So the goal is to just have 2 squares of choux pastry on your baking dish. That's it, no other rules. So do what you will with that information. So you're gonna get an offset spatula or a knife or a fish knife. Those work really well. I like to wet them a little bit and then just go over the squares and evenly distribute the pastry. And by evenly, I mean just like make sure you don't have like a bunch of pastry in the middle and the edges are too thin. Like you want an even amount on all the sides. Here are our beautiful choux pastry squares. Again, don't freak out if they're not even. We're gonna trim the edges if we have to. All you want is like rough looking squares and that's it. This is the fun of this recipe and this is why I made this recipe. You don't have to stress out with like piping them individually and scooping them out and like eclairs and this. You don't have to make rings and fun shapes or anything. Throw them in there, and then that's it. We're gonna move on to making the pastry cream, which is the filling for this eclair cake. I'm gonna turn the heat to medium over here and pour in our dairy. We have a mixture of heavy cream and whole milk. I'm gonna add a little vanilla pod over here. I simply cut it down the middle, and then I just scrape the seeds out. Just scrape all those seeds in there. Vanilla pods are pretty expensive, so you don't wanna waste a whole pod. You can make vanilla essence, vanilla sugar, vanilla everything, but don't throw the pod away, ever, 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 ever. We have all the dairy and the vanilla infusing in there on medium heat, and we're gonna move on to the egg mixture, which contains egg yolks, sugar. You're gonna get yourself a whisk and simply whisk these together. And now we're gonna add the cornstarch and simply whisk the cornstarch in as well. Also, don't forget about the salt. Beautiful, so this is the consistency you're aiming for, a nice pancake batter-like texture. As I'm waiting for this to come to a simmer, I just wanted to tell you, make sure you give it a stir from time to time, just because you don't want the milk to burn on the bottom. While we're waiting for this pot of milk to boil, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Cute! So it's come to a simmer, we're gonna take it off the heat. So now we're gonna stream little splashes of hot milk in the egg yolk mixture. And what this does, it tempers, that's what it's called. It's tempering the eggs, which essentially prevents them from cooking when you pour them in hot milk. If we were to pour the cold eggs into the hot liquid, they would immediately scramble and cook, and we don't want that. We want like a homogeneous, beautiful looking mixture. I always say add more milk in here than you think you'd need. I think this is gonna be our last ladle. Maybe another one. You essentially want to incorporate about half the mixture in here. I feel like that's enough. So next up, we're gonna stream in the yolk mixture and the milk mixture, but what I'm gonna do is strain it through a mesh strainer, just in case when I added the first splash of milk, some yolk cooked, and I'm gonna show you because it did. So just make sure to catch that using a mesh strainer. And now we're simply gonna whisk this together. And now we're back on heat. We are doing low heat. You could do medium low if you've done this before and you know the process, but if you've never done this before, I highly recommend you start with low heat and go slowly. Once the pot is on the heat, you are next to it at all times. I don't want you to go to the bathroom. I don't want you to go to the grocery store. I don't want you to do anything. You have to be here. So get yourself a whisk and don't stop whisking. I feel like that's a very important thing with this. If you stop whisking, the cornstarch and egg yolks get together and they form like a clump inside this mixture. And what we're doing by whisking is making sure everything cooks out evenly. So our mixture is starting to bubble. You can visibly see the bubbles happening. That's when you know you're close to being done. Give it like 1 more minute on the heat and then that's it. You don't want to go more than that. This is the texture you're aiming for. It's not going to pour in like a continuous stream. It's going to be like dollops of custard falling. We're gonna fill the 2 choux pastries with this, and we want it to harden and be sliceable. If we would make like a smooth, silky custard, it would just fall out, and we want it to be sliceable. So that's why it's slightly thicker than your average pastry cream. Let's say you forgot about it. Let's say you forgot whisking, you didn't see the first bubble, and you just like keep doing this. What's gonna happen, this will continue to lose moisture even further, and you'll end up with this clump, like almost like that panade that we made for the choux pastry texture, and you don't want that. But guess what? I'm gonna do that today just to show you how to fix it, because we had a lot of our readers that had some issues with it, and I just want to show you, even if you happen to maybe mismeasure the cornstarch or the egg yolks or something, it's still salvageable and you don't have to throw it away. As this is simmering and cooking, it's losing moisture, so when it's too thick, that means it lost a lot of moisture. All we need to do is bring some moisture back with some heavy cream, some milk, even a splash of water will do the job. I'm using some whole milk, adding about 1/4 cup, and just mixing that in. Let's see what happens. See, it already looks better. And you want to keep cooking this. Like, you don't want to take it off the heat and then cool it and add the milk. Like, that won't work. You want to cook the milk in there. See, it's already much better. Next, get yourself a heat-proof bowl and we're gonna strain the cream once again. Simply pour this in here. The last thing I'm gonna do is throw in a couple of tablespoons of butter. This will reduce the temperature of our custard. It's gonna help it harden. If you wanna skip the butter, you could totally skip the butter, but it adds a lot to it. And now the last step with our pastry cream is sealing it. And by sealing it, I mean covering it with some plastic wrap, and we're gonna press the plastic wrap on the custard, on the pastry cream. You want them to touch. This prevents it from forming a skin. Beautiful, and now we just let this cool. You could put it in an ice bath or put it in the balcony or put it in your backyard. Hopefully no animals will eat it, but if it's winter and it's cold outside, I usually like to leave it outside and then pop it in the fridge for a little bit. Pastry cream done. Moving on to ganache. Dump the chocolate in a bowl. A pinch of salt, again. It's a flavor enhancer. It's not gonna make this thing taste salty. And last but not least, heavy cream. This is just 1 part chocolate, 1 part heavy cream. You can make this in a saucepan, but I will use my microwave today because that's the easiest thing to do. Just dump this in a microwave and check on it every 30 seconds, I would say. Because you have the heavy cream in there, it's kind of harder for the chocolate to burn, but just give it a little whisk every 30 seconds. So you're gonna get the bowl and place it in the microwave. So I'm gonna give this a little whisk. The residual heat from the heavy cream will end up melting the chocolate. So there's that. It's funny, there's always this stage when you're whisking chocolate and heavy cream where it looks super grainy and super almost split, but it's not split and you're not doing anything wrong. That's just what happens before everything melts. And I remember my first time making ganache too. Again, I was a teenager and I threw that one away. I threw it away because I thought I messed something up, but it was just grainy because the chocolate didn't completely melt. What a fun teenager, my goodness. So as you can see, the chocolate has completely melted and it looks glossy and shiny. I'm actually using a mixture of milk chocolate and dark chocolate. Dark chocolate can be a little bit overpowering. I still like it, but if you don't like that intense chocolatey flavor, milk chocolate will do. Beautiful. A few of you told me your chocolate ganache was a little bit too runny and it was falling and pouring all over the edges and wasn't staying on top, and you didn't get that beautiful thick chocolate layer in the Éclair cake. And that's because you probably didn't let this chill for long enough. You wanna let this chocolate ganache cool until it gets almost like a natural peanut butter consistency, where it's still pourable, but it's visibly thicker than what it is right now. And that's the only way to make it stay on top of the cake and get that nice thick ganache layer. In the meantime, our choux pastry has been cooked. Look at that beautiful color. Let me show you the bottom. This is what it looks like. They're still kind of hot, but this is the color you should aim for. So we're back to our chocolate ganache. It's been about 25 minutes and it already has the perfect consistency. This is the consistency of our chocolate ganache at this time. See how it's much thicker and it's almost spreadable now. It's not really pourable, but spreadable. Does that make sense? Like it looks like a store-bought chocolate spread. Beautiful, and it's only been 25 minutes. So everything's ready. It's time to assemble our cake. We're gonna start with the choux pastry, which will be the base for the cake. As you can see, it puffed up so it doesn't fit properly in the pan. And what I'm gonna do is simply trim it with some scissors. You can do this with a knife. Don't throw the excess away. Just dip it in some extra cream or something. But just trim it. You don't have to measure it or anything. It's just one of those things. I'm gonna go in with the pastry cream. As I said, see, we have no skin formed in here whatsoever. Just pour it all. Beautiful, look at that consistency. Gorgeous. Because the choux pastry gets enough time to absorb moisture from the pastry cream, which softens it up and gives it a much better texture. If you're like me and you're a huge fan of custard cream and pastry cream and all this creamy stuff, you could totally double the pastry cream in this recipe. It's gonna be extra creamy and nice. I'm gonna put this over here, press it down. That's why we give the cream a little bit of time to harden, so that when we press it down, there's actually some structure in there and we're not just like pressing it down and everything's just oozing out. So there's that. And now we're going in with the chocolate. Making this dessert made me realize I'm very much a custard dessert person. I'm not dying to eat a galette, you know what I mean? Like I'm not dying to eat an apple pie, but this, you don't wanna see me alone with this cake. I've had 4 slices in one sitting. It was too much, I gotta admit, but it was just one of those things I couldn't stop. So now we're gonna leave this in the fridge overnight, preferably like 12, 14 hours. The more it stays in the fridge, the better. If you cut it in 2 hours, it's gonna be fine, but the choux won't have enough time to soften and it's gonna be a little bit too hard and dry. So it's one of those dishes where the more it stays in the fridge, the better. In the fridge it goes. So you can see the beautifully puffed choux, the pastry cream, and the ganache on top. How perfect does that look? And I'm so excited to dig in. Look at that delicious bite. Cheers. Yummy choux. You know when you just need to dance, like it's that good? It's so